Hello, my friends. This is Heavy Arms Kai, back with another episode of Kerbal Space Program. Last time, we made a spacecraft to capture the asteroid that was in orbit around Kerbin. And this episode, I actually launched it and captured the asteroid. I also created a spacecraft to use I think it was the asteroid sounding science experiment, and basically gathered a little bit more science. But let's get right to it, and I will show you how long it took me to get the stupid asteroid. It was actually far more difficult than I expected. It was not like a normal rendezvous with a spacecraft in orbit. But with that said, let's get to it. So as usual, it was a fairly standard launch. Again, I tried to over guesstimate with my fuel and everything, and it turns out I just barely gave myself enough to actually complete this mission. I could have stood to use a little bit more. I didn't have enough for the final burn, unfortunately. So I went ahead and I circularized my burn and went to a much higher altitude than I normally would. I still had a pretty decent amount of fuel. That whole orange tank is pretty much full, but as you can see, the orbit of this thing is pretty unusual. So I tried to set it up to where I would be able to rendezvous with it. Unfortunately, since the orbit is so large on one end and small on the other, and not like the orbits around Kerbin, I had to do quite a bit of like tinkering with it. Eventually, I started to get it where I wanted it, uh, but like it was going off to this weird angle where the height of my orbit was a little bit higher than the asteroid's orbit, and I wasn't sure how to fix that. Eventually, I found that if I adjusted halfway through my flight path, I could kind of tilt it down a little bit. Like you can see here, I'm looking and I don't understand why it's so much higher. And I thought maybe I could adjust that further out towards the middle, and eventually it works. So like that was pretty easy to figure out. But then the actual ellipse itself is all weird, and again I couldn't figure out why I couldn't get it to be an oval shape, and I just had to go to the very max of my orbit and burn a little bit on that side in order to fix it so that it would match up closer to what the asteroid was. Eventually, I got it to match up, and then I started time warping just to see if I could get both the asteroid and my capture ship to kind of sync up. And I had to do this like many, many times because, as you can see here, every time I start coming towards Kerbin, I speed up drastically, and the asteroid does. And I couldn't really gauge how many orbits it would take, so I pretty much just had to go with it. I think I went around Kerbin like a good 20 or 30 times before eventually I synced up and got close to the actual asteroid. So after a good 20 minutes of time warping, I eventually got really, really close to the asteroid and went about making my maneuvers to rendezvous with it. Uh, Pretty much all I was making sure to do was to stay on target and make sure that it wouldn't pass me up and speed up like it had been doing every time it was heading back to Kerbin. Because if it did that, I would obviously lose it and have to go another full rotation, and I might have fallen behind. So, like normal, I just proceeded to do my RCS burns to rendezvous with it like I would a spaceship to a space station. And here, pretty much all I'm doing is just making sure that the distance is ticking down properly. And I time warp quite a few times to just get it a little bit closer, but I was afraid that if I did that, I might speed it up too much and it would just rocket past me. And then I'd have to use my main engine and burn to get closer to it. But right here, I'm doing pretty good, just checking it out, burning a little bit of my RCS to try and maneuver closer to it. I also turned on the computer control to make sure that my ship was constantly oriented and pointing towards it. But right here, I actually have my RCS on still, and I think I time warped and didn't realize that I had the RCS turned on to where I was burning monopropellant and I didn't mean to. So I kind of wasted a little bit, but I mean, that's okay though. I've got plenty on this ship. I made it specifically so that it was robust and could capture this thing. I still do have plenty of fuel as well, which is also good because I need that to do a slow down braking maneuver to get this thing back into Kerbal. So again, just closing the distance, just waiting for it. I do a few adjustment burns just to make sure that I'm going to be dead on target. It's always good to adjust your what are they? Target marker and your forward marker. I cannot remember for the life of me what that's called right now. But whatever the one that increases your orbit is. But if as long as you keep those lined up as you're closing distance, you're usually going to be dead on target. And like when you slow down, you'll still be pointing directly at it and everything. So if you have docking ports on the front and you're pointed right at the docking port on whatever your target is, you're usually good to go. And still just close the distance. Then I'm gonna cut to when I get right up to it real quick. All right, we're coming in. Time to arm the claw, and it's out and ready to go. And I got the lights ready to go too because it's funny. The landing lights are actually kind of a good judge of distance, no matter what you're doing, because the brighter the light, the closer you are. So you want to use those things when you're landing on like the moon, or when you're coming in to dock, or when you're coming in to capture an asteroid, because they really give you a sense of distance. I believe they did make a mod that was like a rangefinder mod that really helped out with that, but nobody kept up with it, so you really have no other good way to judge distance from an object. I mean, I can see it like since I set target, but that's from the very center of the object that you've set target. So there's still all the outside part of it that it's not accounting for. But we're closing in pretty good, like making sure to keep it slow because I wasn't sure how strong the grappler claw thingy was, and like landing legs can usually take a landing of like what is it, point 0.7 or 7 meters a second. So I wasn't sure whether the grappler claw would be able to do the same or not. I also put again tons of the reaction control wheels on this thing because I wasn't sure how large this asteroid would be. I think this is like A scale. There's like A through D, and A is the smallest. So we've captured a pretty small size asteroid and didn't really need all the reaction controls. But just in case it was a little bit larger, I still had all that to be able to maneuver and turn it around. Now, again, with these objects, since they're kind of weighted weird, I wasn't really sure where to latch on to where eventually I just said screw it and picked a spot. Like, I think I tried to come in on the flat surface on the top because it looked like a decent target. Just coming in. Nope, no, I did not. I went for the side. But that's pretty close to center of mass, I would say. As I was doing my burns to deorbit this thing, it actually wasn't too bad. It didn't pull too much to one side or the other, so I got the center pretty decently on this thing. And now I just got to deorbit a little bit. And obviously, in order to do that, I'm going to have to go to the other side of this orbit to bring it down. So give me a second. Now that we're at the other extreme, we can get ready to burn and slow this sucker down. I've already burnt quite a bit of fuel uh, trying to get out here, so we're going to basically just waste all the rest of it, slowing us down. And I want to make sure I'm turned the right way. I found out that you can actually set as target the center of mass of the asteroid itself, but for some reason I couldn't get out of that setting target thing. And I was trying to figure out how to basically go to the periaps of my orbit to get it like smaller, but it wouldn't get out of this target center of mass thing that was going on with the asteroid. So I pretty much just had to wing it and figure out exactly where I had to point to get this thing working just right. And that's really all I'm doing right here. You can see I've got a little bit of wobble, but I had more than enough struts to make this thing stable. It really helps out to basically stitch up everything with struts because I mean they don't take up that much weight, but they're worth it in the long run because they will make your things hold together insanely good. So we've ditched the other fuel tank and we're basically just running off of whatever's left in this small little unit here, just try and deorbit as much as possible. And like I said, the center of mass on this thing really didn't affect us much at all. Now, one of the things I don't like is how the orbit of this is so like kinked off to the side, and I unfortunately wasted a lot of fuel trying to fix that. Whenever you're adjusting orbits to basically make them around the planet instead of up and over, it takes way more fuel. And like here you can see I'm setting up to try and do that burn just so that I can figure out where I need to point the spacecraft. But eventually I ended up finding out that man, that takes a crap ton of fuel. And this is about as good as I'm gonna get it. Like I'm pretty much out of fuel. It's going, and gone. But that's not too bad. I mean, it's really close, and I can send up another craft to like fix the rest of it. And that shit worked pretty dang well. Like I was really surprised how easy it was for me to capture this asteroid with just a the first ship that I made. I could actually take this thing and just detach it and get it out of here and leave the asteroid in orbit to do science on and everything like that. I did put several extra solar panels on this thing. I'm not exactly sure why. I probably could have put all the science experiments on this craft and seen if I could have used them to record science from the asteroid itself. But we'll make a separate craft for that. I'm going to use a bit of an RCS burn just to get that orbit a little bit tighter and more angled properly with like the starfish solar or the starfish station and all the other stuff I have in orbit. I mean, I've got plenty of RCS fuel that I can easily just waste it all, and this craft isn't really going to do anything else, so I might as well. I again, like I said, I could probably just detach this craft and deorbit it and leave the asteroid in orbit of Kerbin. But with that said, let's get to the other craft I made to record science from this. Okay, so basically what we need is a craft that can hold a Kerbal, and we need something to put this is the asteroid sounding science experiment, and we need two of them. We need one on one side of the asteroid and one on the other side of the asteroid. So I'm going to make a unmanned claw thing to put on the top of our spacecraft that contains our Kerbal, and basically latch it to the asteroid, detach it, and then fly the manned craft with the Kerbal in it to the other side. That way we can get the science that we need for what we're doing. And basically all I'm doing is just the standard stuff. You know, you put your RCS, you put your controls, you put all that other stuff. Think I'm not sure if asteroids will give you other science with all these other experiments, so I'm going to add them anyways, just in case, because you never know. It's the first time I've ever captured an asteroid, so we shall see. But yeah, just the basic stuff, strutting it up and making sure everything's gonna sit right. And I also need to make sure that when this thing comes back down, everything is good to go because I've got a lot of science equipment on the outsides of this. So I used a larger heat shield this time. But really, it's just a simple design. I wasn't going for aesthetics, I was just going for functionality here. I will put a small fuel tank on this one along with some pretty large RCS because I'm not sure how much I'm going to need in order to get into the right position around the asteroid. And obviously, you always need solar panels, RCS, all that good stuff. But yeah, like I said, pretty simple design, nothing too crazy here. And give it a name, and there we go. So yeah, that's it, guys. We're gonna launch this on the next episode and try and get some science from an asteroid. But please like this video, subscribe, and let me know if you like the videos in the comments down below. Till next episode, talk to you guys later.